Webb in tonight for Sean. A lot of breaking news tonight. President Trump, this is brand new, telling the New York Times that he thinks special counsel Robert Mueller will treat him fairly. That kind of flies in the face of the narrative in the press. The president also saying that the Russia investigation is making the country look bad. And also tonight, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes slamming the DOJ and the FBI for what he says is a failure to turn over documents related to the anti-Trump dossier. Plus, a Pew Research study proves just how biased and unfair the mainstream media has been to President Trump. And the president calling out China over a recent report that they're illegally selling oil to North Korea. We'll have reaction to all of those stories. First, President Trump closing out the year by touting his accomplishments and looking ahead to 2018. In Washington tonight with the details, our very own Ellison Barber.
Hi, David. President Trump is expected to meet with Republican leaders early in the new year. The White House says Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan are both invited to Camp David, the very first weekend in January.
I think you'll see the president roll out infrastructure plan in January, and the president has already invited Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan to Camp David the first weekend in January to make sure we're all on the same page about what our priorities are for 2018.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders told Fox News last week the administration is still deciding on the top priorities in 2018, but some potential items include immigration reform and infrastructure. White House officials tell Fox News they are planning to lay out an infrastructure plan in January. Officials say they're looking at spending about $200 billion in direct federal spending and easing environmental and labor regulations that they say will stimulate $1 trillion in public works investment.
Infrastructure is the easiest of all. We're very well on our way.
We are ready with a strong infrastructure bill that was put on the president's desk in January. We're still waiting to get feedback on that. It would create 15 million jobs.
So what are we going to do in 2018? We're going to pick up where we left off and get back at reforming health care. We're going to get back at reforming these entitlements, and we're going to take on welfare reform.
President Trump promised $1 trillion infrastructure bill on the campaign trail. Democrats already have an infrastructure bill, as you just heard. And as you also heard from Paul Ryan there, some Republicans seem to have other ideas when it comes to the top legislative priorities in 2018. President Trump also seems to think this year has been a legislative success. He tweeted a couple of days ago about tax reform, saying that business is looking good for next year, quote, only to be helped further by our tax bill. Today, he tweeted about retail sales, claiming they're at record levels. And he also tweeted and retweeted a couple of articles praising his work on things like MS-13 and the economy. David?
Thank you, Ellison. Also tonight, Democrats predicting a blue wave in the 2018 midterm elections. I put the emphasis there because we'll discuss it. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich saying not so fast in a new.com op-ed, foxnews.com op-ed titled "Get Ready for the Political Surprise of 2018." Gingrich explains how the Republicans will shock the political landscape in 2018 because of three key factors. One, Republicans keeping their promises, voters rejecting fake news, and because Americans will have more money in their pockets thanks to the GOP tax bill. Joining us now with reaction, former Secret Service agent and Conservative Review contributing editor Dan Bongino, RNC spokesperson Kayleigh McEnany, and former Clinton pollster and Fox News contributor, and our friend Doug Schoen. Doug, let me go right to you as the man in the center politically, we'll call you that,
Absolutely.
as the centrist Democrat. What do you say to Speaker Gingrich's prediction that there will be a shock in the Republican quarters?
Well, I would say to my good friend Newt Gingrich, go back to 1994 when the Democrats passed a tax bill with no Republican support, and it led to a Republican wave, the Contract for America. And I think with President Trump at a level of approval in the mid-30s, the Democrats with 11-point lead in the generic vote, and history suggesting that in the midterm of a first-term president, that there's an average of, I think, 24 to 30 odd seats picked up in the House. it's much more likely that the Democrats have the blue wave you spoke of, David, than that there be a Republican wave.
Yeah, but Kayleigh, is this the same environment as 1994? And I've said this before. We've got a generational change. We've got a change in the electorate. You look at the changes in the state legislatures. I understand Doug's points on the history of this and the track record. But you know what? History and polls aren't always right.
That's right. And Democrats are singing the same tired tune that they sang in 2016 when they said Donald Trump would never win. Their optimism, they have no cause for it now because Donald Trump has achieved historic victories. You look at ISIS, 15,000 fighters 2 years ago. Now there are fewer than 1,000. You look at tax cuts, $1,000 in American people's pockets starting in February. Every single front Donald Trump has achieved, and every single front Democrats have obstructed. They've deceived and they've distracted from the issues the American people care about. It's a different generation for sure, a different time, and Democrats do not have cause for optimism in 2018.
All right, Dan, now Secret Service agents are blue-collar guys. You know, you get paid okay when you were there, but you don't get a whole lot of money. The blue-collar economy, the blue-collar billionaire, now President Donald Trump. Do you think those centrist Democrats, do you think those Midwest Democrats are going to go back to the Democrats over the Republicans and over, I think more importantly, over President Trump?
No, David, they're not. I mean, what are the Democrats offering you other than that Republicans hate you because you're fill in the blank, you know, the identity politics routine? Seriously, what are they offering? And the answer is they're offering nothing. I mean, is there policy going to be next year to run against the tax cuts? In other words, we think the government should be entitled to more of your money. Here's a better one. Are they going to run against the repeal of the individual mandate and say, no, we think you should be able to, you should be forced to buy again next year, overpriced, really crappy health insurance that nobody wants? I mean, they've yet to put on the table a substantive platform outside of the identity politics agenda that's going to resonate in places like Pennsylvania, in the panhandle of Florida. I think this blue wave is a fiction. I could be proven wrong, but I doubt it's going to happen.
All right, now, Doug, before we go to you, because you've really been involved in the trenches in campaigns, and Kayleigh as well, I want to go to the leadership and call it the old guard. This is Howard Dean, he of the famous Scream, talking about what's needed in the Democrat Party. Let's play this.
Sure.
I actually think the progressives are in the process of informally taking over the Democratic Party. I think the country has moved to the left. It's shocking to me, but a majority of Americans think Medicare for all is a good idea. I mean, and that, frankly, Bernie gets a lot of credit for that. I don't think he's going to be the next nominee, but he could be. Because I'm very much for somebody who's younger. I think my generation's got to get the hell out of politics, start coaching, and start moving up this next generation.
All right, so, Doug, I got to put up two screens and let you take it from there. You know the structure of running a campaign. Here are the fundraising numbers for the RNC. Sure. All right, you got total receipts, $121.4 million, cash on hand, $39.8, debt owed, $0. Then we go to the Democrats. The Democrats, $60.7 million, cash on hand, $6.3, and $2.6 in debt. Eventually, the primaries end, and you need the national party, the fundraising to fund the campaigns to make them win. Sure. How do the Democrats do this?
Well, a couple of ways. First, I do reject the notion that the Democrats are a progressive party that need to move to the left. If they're going to win working class voters back, it's not by moving to the left. Frankly, the best asset the Democrats now have are the Republicans and their lack of popularity, because sadly, Dan is right. There is not a centrist, inclusive Democratic agenda. And I say to my friends and colleagues in the Democratic Party, you need one on growth, on infrastructure, and it necessarily involves the Republicans as well. But the individual Democrats running, David, to your question, are outraising the Republicans. I think there have been 30, 35-odd Republican retirements. The fundraising numbers for the party committees, I believe, are running parallel with, if not in some instances ahead of the Republicans. And if the Democrats stay 11 points ahead, there's one thing I know for sure. They will raise all the money they need, as they did in 2016. Money is not the Democratic Party's problem. It's message.
All right, Kayleigh, message, money. But Donald Trump stole some of their issues. Did he steal infrastructure? Did he steal blue-collar issues from the Democrats? And to Doug's point, their party shifted hard to the left.
David, undoubtedly, Donald Trump spoke to those factory workers in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania who the Democrats had left behind. I mean, if Democrats would listen to Doug, they might have a chance in 2018. But unfortunately, the Democratic Party has floated so far left. They're the party of socialism that wants to take your money, that wants to overregulate you, that wants to force you to buy health care. That's the state of the Democratic Party. And then on top of all of that, they're the party that rigs elections for Hillary Clinton at the expense of Bernie Sanders. They're the party that rigs elections. They're the party of socialism. That's their legacy.
All right. So, Dan, we've gone through the political analysis on the ground. And I know you watch this carefully. You talk about it when you get on radio and television as well. What about the boots on the ground, the people that are going to volunteer to help the parties, the blue-collar folks out there? They wear out a lot of shoe leather walking for candidates. Where do you see the energy? More with the Democrats, more with the Republicans, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, I'll take each side first. The Democrats, David, there's no question, and it doesn't do Republicans any good to ignore this. They're angry. And to deny the fact that anger is a great motivator to get people out to the polls, you're just making a fool of yourself. They are angry. They are going to show up, and we have seen relatively high turnout, astronomical turnout in Alabama. For Republicans to ignore that is political suicide. But having said that, the media is doing itself no favors by constantly providing a foil and a reason to be angry for Republican voters. There's a litany of fake news, false charges against the president constantly, bad reporting. There's this special counsel investigation that's and I don't mean to highlight anger too much, but it's a real human emotion and a real motivator. And Republicans are angry too. And until this stops, this witch hunt against the president, I think that this special counsel and the media and their zero credibility and their collapsing credibility, I think it's doing the president, the sitting president, a great favor, and is going to be a great motivator in these midterm elections to get people out.
All right, special counsel. Now we have a New York Times report I mentioned at the beginning of the show. The president saying that he believes Robert Mueller, and I'm paraphrasing in this 30-minute interview, saying that he believes Mueller will treat him fairly. Doug, from there, I mean, breaking news, the president saying what the Democrats are not. They're saying he's going to fire Mueller, he's going to throw him out, or the media, whatever. And now he says, hey, Mueller's going to treat me well.
Well, look, I think that's a very positive development. The Democrats should get off the line of saying that, former Director Mueller's, removal is imminent. Let this process play itself out. Don't politicize it. Let's see what General Flynn has to say, what Mr. Papadopoulos has to say, and most of all, let's let the investigation play out. Though I must confess, the FBI and the DOJ do have issues that have to be investigated, but Bob Mueller is a man of unquestionable integrity. His investigation has a ways to go. Watergate, I think, took 3 or 4 years. This is still, I think, 4 or 5 months into the process. More time, more energy has to be committed. There have been 4 pleas already. There's more to go before we can reach a judgment.
Kayleigh, months. Okay, Doug said Watergate took 3 years plus. He's right. Different time. Now we have technology. We have the FBI and the DOJ effectively, according to Devin Nunes, stonewalling on delivering documents, and FOIA requests are flying out of Judicial Watch. Did the president and what he just said hand the RNC and the messaging arm of the RNC a chance to go out there and say, look, we're not trying to shut it down. We want it to go forward. What is that message?
Absolutely. The president's always been clear. He wants this investigation to conclude and to be conducted fairly because there's no Trump-Russia collusion. That was always a conspiracy theory. Also, one of the biggest fake news stories of the year, it's hard to rank them, but perhaps taking the cake, is this idea that President Trump was ever going to fire Bob Mueller. He was never going to fire Mueller. Mueller's tidying up this investigation. It's coming to a close, and it's time for Democrats to step back, accept the facts that that Russia-Trump collusion was always based on little more than rumors and the newspapers. That's in the words of, by the way, Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat. That's what this was based on. It was a hoax to topple the American people and the person who they chose in the 2016 election, and that was Donald Trump.
All right, so Dan, who do you think answers in the long run with the dossier, who paid for what? We've heard all the debate on that. Who answers? Is it the FBI? Is it Mueller? Is it other replaced chief of station? You name it. Who is it?
Yeah. You know, David, if Donald Trump's name was Donald Obama, this would be the scandal of the millennium. I mean, think about what's happened here. This is a complicated case. I get it. The viewers get confused sometimes. Here's what happened. Boil it down to the nuts and bolts. A president-elect was spied on by a sitting president via unmasking techniques. None of that is in dispute. The only thing in dispute is why he was spied on. David, can you answer that question? To this day, nobody can answer the question why the president was spied on. Oh, they'll say, oh, it was Russian collusion. Where? Where's the collusion?
Well, they've clearly got to develop the evidence. They clearly have to present something. Or, Doug, I hope we don't see 3 to 4 years of this. I hope we don't see 4 or 5 months.
I hope we don't either. But
I don't think it's good for the country.
I just don't think we can politicize, rush to judgment. General Flynn, who was, I think, working closely with the Russians on his own, has taken a plea, a very favorable plea. We got to hear what he's got to say.
Not during the campaign, during the transition, Doug.
Well, no, he went to Russia in January of 15. He made a compensated speech. He sat with Vladimir
by the way,
Putin.
by the Obama administration that reauthorized this security clearance. Guys, I got to leave it there. But, Doug, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
David,
Kelly,
always a pleasure
Dan,
as well.
We have much more to come on this. Coming up, more on President Trump saying he believes special counsel Robert Mueller will treat him fairly. That's right, he said it. We'll get reaction from Florida Attorney General Pam Biondi and our very own Greg Jarrett. Stay with us.
Fox News Channel is bringing you an all-American New Year's celebration from New York City and around the country. Catch the biggest live performances and join the conversation using hashtag Fox News 2018. Kick back and watch the ball drop with your hosts Hannity and Jesse Waters live from the heart of Times Square. Our must-see coverage begins New Year's Eve at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fox News Channel.
Trump predicting that special counsel Robert Mueller will, quote, treat him fairly. And while he's not calling for an end to the investigation, he told the New York Times, and I quote, the sooner it's worked out, the better it is for the country. We'll get back to that in a moment. But also tonight, we'll turn to a letter exclusively obtained by Fox News from House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, in which he blasts the DOJ and the FBI for their failure to fully, and I say fully, produce documents related to the anti-Trump dossier. Nunes writes that he wants the records by January 3rd, and he also wants to know by that date when the witnesses his committee subpoenaed back in August about the dossier will be available to testify. He ends the letter by writing, and I quote again, at this point, it seems the DOJ and FBI need to be investigating themselves. This letter comes on the heels of a report from the Washington Examiner's Byron York that Nunes is issuing a subpoena to David Kramer, a former State Department employee with ties to Senator McCain. Joining us now with reaction, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. I got it right there, Pam. Let's have a little fun with it. I do this to you a lot of times, don't I? Put that extra I in there. And our Fox News legal analyst, Greg Jarrett. Pam, first to you. Looking at this as someone who, from the Attorney General's chair, has had to do a lot of high-profile cases. When you start getting these ties, when you start getting these questions about who has ties to what, a compendium of questionable information, practices, tweets, what do you do when you're at the top of this?
Well, Chair Nunes is doing exactly what he should do, and I'm proud of what he did. You know, and I always start off by saying, as a career prosecutor, my entire career, and now Attorney General of the third largest state in the country, There are about 40,000 great men and women of the FBI throughout this country, and there are a few bad ones in the Justice Department who are making the rest look bad. And that's not fair to those great men and women who are out there risking their lives every day. We have Wiseman, we have Strzok, we have Page, and by the way, Strzok shouldn't be in HR, he should be fired. We have now James Baker allegations. We have all of these things. So the Intelligence Committee, they have to take it upon themselves, I think Greg will agree, to do the investigation the right way and call for these people to be taken off who can't handle it the right way.
And, you know, Devin Nunes, what does he smell here?
He smells a cover-up. There's only one reason why you would defy and stonewall and evade a lawful congressional subpoena for 4 long months, and that is if you're trying to hide evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the FBI and the Department of Justice. It all comes down to the dossier. If it's true that it was a complete fabrication and the FBI knew it, and nevertheless they used it to launch the Trump investigation, that renders the entire investigation a charade and delegitimizes the Mueller investigation. You've got this all too cozy group of guys, Comey, Mueller, Weissman, excuse me, and
Andrew
Rod
Weissman, Bruce Orr.
Yeah, they've
guys.
all worked together for years and years and years. And there's something unseemly about that because they appear to be ignoring evidence of illegality on the part of Hillary Clinton, potential illegality on the part of the FBI. And they seem to be determined to find wrongdoing on the part of President Trump where none exists.
All right, Pam, unfortunately, sometimes you can't separate the law and politics, especially when you get into either a state capital or a nation's capital. So even if, as Greg says and lays out, and you've talked about, they're able to deal with the inconsistencies, the problems, the investigation falls apart or they're unable to produce evidence, there is a political aspect to this. How would that be resolved, and is it possible?
Well, I've come to the conclusion now that this investigation into the president needs to end. Every day we're finding out someone else involved in it. And as Greg said, I mean, this investigation should be beyond reproach. And there are so many great men and women out there who are capable of conducting an investigation with integrity. The FBI stands for integrity. That is their motto. And that's what we've completely lost here. And when you're an FBI agent, regardless of who it is, it should not be about politics. And clearly they've demonstrated, these people that we've all laid out, have demonstrated such an extreme bias, but potentially criminal actions by changing. Strzok was involved in talking to Comey about changing the language so Hillary Clinton wouldn't be criminally charged. I mean, this is serious stuff that we're dealing with a few really bad people at the top making the rest look bad who shouldn't in our country.
I think most of the FBI rank and file, good, fine, honorable, hardworking, excellent people. It's the senior management, this group of individuals, McCabe and Baker and Strzok and Page and even James Comey, that are suspect by virtue of their actions and the messages they exchanged. This needs to be looked into, and Devin Nunes says it's time you guys investigate yourself. I disagree. They cannot investigate themselves fairly and objectively. And so this demands a second special counsel to look into their conduct. The Inspector General's already doing it, but he has no real authority to bring a case.
All right, well, that's the case for the special counsel. This resistance, Pam, goes a little deeper and I think a little wider. When you look at things like the New York Attorney General, your counterpart in the state of New York, Eric Schneiderman, when you look at Hillary Clinton, you just mentioned her. You can't seem to get her out of the conversation. The resistance and the deep state combined, and Greg's points about they can't investigate themselves. But does a special counsel get us where we need to be, in your opinion?
Well, as the state attorney general, knowing Jeff Sessions, our United States Attorney General, what I hope Jeff Sessions, Greg, has already done, and we don't know about it, is come in and have these people all work for him. He is the man at the top, and I'm hoping that General Sessions has come in and has somebody investigating all of them. You know, we hear now that who's resigning? McCabe is going to resign. McCabe should be fired if these allegations are true, where he's not getting his pension. He's going to resign in 2018. He should be taken out of the FBI immediately. So I would hope that our U.S. Attorney General is investigating all of these people through a special counsel, because Greg's right. They can't investigate themselves.
And you know what tips me off about Mueller and his lack of fairness and impartiality? He knew early this last summer that Strzok had sent these anti-Trump, pro-Hillary text messages to Lisa Page. He knew that, removed him, but never disclosed it to Congress upon their request and demands. He stalled for 4 long months, and so did Rosenstein. They covered it up. Now, if you truly care about the fair administration of justice, you don't cover that up. And to those who argue, well, he removed them, so it's okay, how much damage did people like Strzok and Lisa Page do in the full year they were investigating Trump, first with the FBI investigation and then later in the Mueller investigation?
All right, guys, we got to wrap this up quickly, but I'll go to Pam on this one, and that is, of course, President Trump and Rod Rosenstein. Here we go again. The New York Times, I mean, President Trump's being outspoken. What do you say?
Well, President Trump knows he didn't do anything wrong, and this has gone on long enough. And that's why I think President Trump said what he said. He knows he didn't do anything wrong. He knows this has gone on way too long. He's out there doing tax reform, putting great Supreme Court justices on the bench. All of our rates are lower than they've ever been. Unemployment is lowest it's ever been. The president's out there doing his job. He knows he did nothing wrong. We need to move on with this.
All right, so Greg, if you know you've done nothing wrong, and let's take in Pam's comments, and you're the president, has he set himself up correctly with the Mueller statement that he made to the New York Times? And what should he do about Rod Rosenstein, if anything, next?
Well, first of all, he said exactly what I would tell him to say if I were his lawyer. Don't criticize Mueller himself. And the president's smart enough to do that without counsel. And that's what he did. In terms of Rod Rosenstein, I mean, this is deeply troubling. He has a conflict of interest that disqualifies him, but he continues to insist that he will not recuse himself from the case. He continues to insist all is well. Everything's perfect. Mr. Rosenstein, everything is not perfect. Look at all the people that have been removed because of misconduct in this case and suspicion of wrongdoing. That tells us all is not well.
All right. Well, thank you, Pam. Greg, great to see you again, as always. Coming up, a new shocking study from the Pew Research Center exposes just how biased the mainstream media has become. Prepare to be outraged. We'll bring it to you next. Stay with us on Hannity. Years about the extreme bias in the mainstream media. And according to a brand new study from Pew Research Center, the media's coverage of President Trump's first 60 days in office was historically negative. As you can see, just 5% of the reporting was positive, while a whopping 62% was negative. Compare that to the media's coverage of President Obama's first 60 days in office in 2009, where 42% of the coverage was favorable. Of course, this shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone. Here's just a small sample of the media's coverage of President Trump over the past 12 months.
He's unhinged. It's embarrassing. His speech was without thought. It was without reason. It was devoid of facts. It was devoid of wisdom. There was no gravitas. There was no sanity there.
We have an Archie Bunker-in-chief who is disrespecting American Indians and making classless jokes from the podium.
Is this president trying to impersonate Hugo Chavez, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin?
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone else around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
He's gained weight, according to these sources. He doesn't trust people around him. He's withdrawing. Not a good picture.
He's a racist. Okay? He came proverbially as close as you could possibly come to shouting in a rally the N-word. That's what he did down there.
Donald Trump, again, being a schmuck. He looked like a thug. He looked like a goon. You look at the handshake. Look at this. Just what a thug. And you have somebody inside the White House that the New York Daily News says is mentally unfit, that people close to him say is mentally unfit, that people close to him during the campaign told me had early stages of dementia.
I asked the simple question, where's the policy disagreement in all these comments from the media? I know they're out there actually somewhere. Joining us with Reaction, Fox News contributors Tammy Bruce and Deneen Borelli, as well as Democratic pollster Pat Caddell. Pat, great to see you. It's been a while, Pat, so I'll start with you. You've analyzed media and politics for many years. When you look at this type of coverage and you look at the compendium of this, what do you say to the media? Are they getting the Trump bump for their ratings, and do they need it, or would they survive without it?
Well, I assume they would survive no matter what, but they have clearly been building their ratings on this. But, it just didn't start in the early days of this administration. As Pew says, we've had it for the entire year. We had it to the entire campaign. We have more and more studies that show that the major networks, 90% of the stories that they have been running for the last 9 months or so are negative. We see that from the Media Center reports. We see all of it. And you don't even need the numbers to know. All you have to do is read the New York Times and the Washington Post and some of the other press and watch some of the other cable networks to realize how biased, as Jimmy Carter said, the worst media any president has received. The media is supposed to be in our system adversarial or challenging in the sense of transparency. But this media is much worse. What it is doing is it is running its own narratives. It is not adversarial. It is oppositional. It has decided it is in arm in arm with the opposition of the Democratic Party to this president. And they do it in terms that are so incredible, as you just ran some of them. Thug, racist, whatever you want to call it, demented, all of the things that you hear regularly, the President of the United States being called, which are unprecedented. And then people say he's unprecedented in his hostility, then they have certainly deserved it.
All right, so Tammy, let me go to you on this because, I see this as not good for the country. I see this, regardless of what side you come at this from, when the media does this, they abrogate a key responsibility, like Pat said, to be adversarial, to ask tough questions, but it's not good.
Well, let me suggest that this also is not new. It is just a little bit of a different shade. A different light has been turned on in what the media has been doing for generations. And this is what has been so valuable about Donald Trump. So we saw the positive and the love for Barack Obama. But now what we've seen, of course, normally, and then you heard nothing really about the Republicans. You heard nothing. Part of the problem with the media is what they don't report. And that you can't prove that. You can't prove a negative, right? But then we see with Donald Trump, of course, the opposite. And this is the perfect juxtaposition now that we needed the coverage of Barack Obama to see, and this extreme difference when it comes to Donald Trump, proving that, in fact, yes, the adversarial position is not new. It's not just for this year. It's been exposed. I would argue that it started with Walter Cronkite and the nature of his coverage of the Vietnam War. And there was no other alternative. Of course, Fox News didn't exist. There was no talk radio. There's none of that to show that. I think this has been the media's nature. I think it has done damage to this country now for several generations. And once again, just like with the stock market, Donald Trump wakes up, and has exposed this very important dynamic. And what we now can do, it's proven and shown to the American people, we have a responsibility to look for other sources. We know to trust our instinct more, the value of a variety of opinions, which you now only get on Fox News, and to make sure that this is what continues. And I think that's why it's bad in one way, but the clarity of it, I think, is very good.
All right, Deneen, generationally, we've got a new generation in technology. Twitter, the president uses it. First president to really use it. Obama had an account. Trump uses his account. Some say often times where they wish he'd sleep a little bit more in the early morning. But not only is it a way around the media, but is it helping? Is the media competing with the media they can't control?
When you said the word of the day is control, because the media, the liberal media, is simply unable to control President Trump. So he is able to get around the media because the media, just like you said, will not report on what Americans need to know about. And, you know, what's really unfortunate is that you have so many lies and misinformation that is out there from the media that is not supposed to be biased, but they are. And it's people are having a tough time just knowing what the actual truth is. We do this for a living. I'm juggling myself what's true and what's not true before going on TV and on radio because I don't want to make a fool of myself. So hardworking Americans, they're raising their families. They want to know what's going on in our country. And sadly, the liberal media really is doing a disservice to Americans.
All right, so Pat, take it.
I would argue.
Go ahead.
I would argue, David, it's even worse and more dangerous. Because it's one thing for the press to say he shouldn't have been elected and you shouldn't be voting for him and he's terrible and get rid of him. That's bad enough. That we have not had. But we also now have this where this thing of where truth is not told. The facts. We have narratives from the liberal media, mainstream media, but we don't have facts. For example, they cover up, and the word is cover up. They purposely have dropped a steel curtain around Washington as it relates to the scandals, whether the scandals in Obama's administration, which they refused to cover, and those that we now see in the FBI, in the stories, whether it's Uranium One, whether it's the dossier. Facts they don't say. Their narratives are, if you raise questions about the Mueller investigation, you're anti-American and you're trying to destroy American institutions. But they will not give the people the facts where they can then make a judgment.
But, you know, Pat,
on these
and we've
things
got
that
to
are
wrap
going
this
on.
up quickly. So let me ask the ladies this, Pat, because you bring up a very good point. And I want to take you to this, ladies, quickly each. Tammy first. People are sourcing their own facts. They're digging. The new technology, the web, it allows them to do that. Are they doing it enough?
I think they are, and there's, of course, a concern about issues of the sources and all of that. Americans make good judgment. They know what something's legitimate or not. And, yeah, we're doing a good job, I think.
Is Pat right? Do we need to dig deeper on our own?
We do need to do our own due diligence and not just take the news that's coming out of face value.
All right. Great to see you all. Pat, great to see you, my friend. Have a very happy New Year. Tammy Bruce, Deneen Borelli. Coming up, President Trump putting the Chinese on notice. This after a report surfaced that they were illegally selling oil to North Korea. We're going to break down the mounting global tension surrounding North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Don't go away.
Identity thieves know if your email address is on the dark web. Do you? Find out.
Caught red-handed. Very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go into North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korea problem if this continues to happen. Also, in an interview later with the New York Times that we talked about earlier, President Trump said he's disappointed and hinted that his patience may end soon with China. President Trump's comments follow the release of recent U.S. satellite images published in a South Korean newspaper that appear to show ships from China, you see them right there, and North Korea illegally trading oil. China today denied any wrongdoing and says it has consistently followed all UN resolutions against the rogue nation. Joining us now, author of the new book, Direct Fire, retired Brigadier General Tony Tata, and radio talk show host Larry Elder. Gentlemen, good to see you, Larry. Good to see you again. General, let me go right to you on this. When you look at the satellite imagery, when you look at the release of that information and what the president has said, for years I've said they're the simmering pot China keeps fueling, keeps it bubbling, never really boils over. But the dynamics changing with the Trump doctrine, where are we now? Are we in a more dangerous spot? Do we see an opening? And what about China?
Well, David, you're exactly right. We're in a very dangerous spot. China loves having that North Korea stick in our eye constantly, as does Russia. But I think what we're seeing is the persistent, constant application of interagency elements of national power, where you have Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, Department of State, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, all applying the elements of power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, against North Korea. And now, today, with the leak, the release of these pictures, we have started an information war, for lack of a better term, against China. Because when you think about, in Chinese culture in particular, the concept of face, where China has voted 3 times now to have sanctions against North Korea, and now the country is seen as not following those sanctions. President Xi has lost face. President Trump knows this. This was a very deliberate move. It was part of an information campaign, and it's a warning to China to stop and get with the program. And you owe us one now. And so that's what I see happening right now, David.
All right, Larry, to add to that, and the point of information and face, as the general puts it, some other things not talked about. North Korea now has actual internet reaching more and more people. They have an active black market. Right. That means that we can get information into North Korea where the leadership certainly doesn't want it to be. Face North Korea information. Are we breaking down the walls? Are we showing this for what it really is?
Well, I hope so. I hope we're getting aggressive, but we've had a mess for a very long time under both Republican and Democratic presidents. Under Bill Clinton, he sends Jimmy Carter, the former president, over to negotiate an end to the North Korean nuclear program. He leaves the room and they double over laughing and continue to take the concessions, but continue to develop weapons. And they're getting better and better at developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, and at some point may be able to develop one that hits any part of the 48 states. This is very, very dangerous, and Donald Trump has recognized that. But I'll tell you something else, David. The North Koreans went to school on Libya. Recall that when we invaded Iraq in 2003, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya was so scared he turned over his nuclear program, and now they're under lock and key in Tennessee. But for reasons that still escape me, the Obama administration joined with the French and the British to bomb Libya and to get Muammar Gaddafi out of power. I dare say they would have made a different decision had he remained a WMD power holder. That's what North Korea is looking at, and believe me, that's what the Iranians are looking at. It's a very dangerous situation. And President Trump, in my opinion, is realistically trying to do something about it.
All right, so General, and Larry just mentioned part of my next point, because North Korea, China, and Iran have a dangerous connection. Back in the mid-2000s, it was China that facilitated the transit of materials between Iran and North Korea. They have a co-development program in their missile program. We see that clearly. Iran is present, advancing their hegemonic aspirations in the Middle East by building a co-development program with North Korea. So those 3 elements tie together. And China, of course, has investments in the Middle East, and they work in Iran. So how does the president navigate that triumvirate, or frankly, that triad?
Well, it's 3-dimensional chess, David. If you recall, North Korea and Iran are 2 of the 3 original members of the Axis of Evil that George W. Bush talked about as the major security threats to the United States. And now, we're partnering with Israel to counter Iranian hegemony in the region. And we're doing that really in priority to counter the nuclear program, to make sure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. If you recall, the 1994 Clinton-Perry nuke deal with North Korea has led us to where we are now, and Obama's nuke deal with Iran is very much like that deal, so we can look 20 years ahead and see where we might be with Iran. And so secondly, you got Hezbollah and Hamas, and working very closely with our allies in Israel and perhaps Jordan as well, and Saudi Arabia. We're going to begin to take efforts underway to counter Hezbollah and Hamas in a way. And I can remember when I was in the Balkans in the 90s, we were able to follow rat lines of weapons and money all the way back to Tehran. And so they've been a state sponsor of terror for decades now. And this Iranian nuclear deal is the craziest thing that I've ever seen. And I'm so glad that President Trump has the foresight to undo that and block that and work with our allies in the region.
All right, Larry, less than a minute left, my friend. I know you know about hard breaks, but economic power, does economic power become a greater weapon for us?
Well, it does, but the bottom line is real simple. Once a country becomes a nuclear power, like a rogue state like North Korea, your options are very, very narrow, and you're left with a military option because it appears that China is not going to abide by the sanctions. They've been cheating for a long time. Donald Trump just outed them, but they were cheating during the Obama administration as well, because it's in their best interest to have this rogue nation poking at us. They don't want it to collapse because they're going to have a huge refugee problem. So once you've allowed a country to become a nuclear power,
all right,
it's
I got to
very
wrap
difficult.
it here,
Your options
Larry.
are limited,
Unfortunately, that hard break is up against us. General, Larry, thank you both.
Thank you, David.
Coming up, more Hannity after the break. Stay with us.